Good evening, Black people and all allies fighting for Black liberation, Black prosperity, and Black joy. I'm Charles Blow, and welcome to Prime. The nation is mourning today after a trailblazer, someone who shaped U.S. policy and someone whose influence not only crossed party lines but also was felt around the world, has passed away. Colin Powell, the youngest and first Black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the first Black Secretary of State, died this morning at the age of 84 after experiencing complications from COVID-19. Powell's family says he was vaccinated but had been undergoing treatment from multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer that weakens the body's ability to fight infection. He was also reportedly battling early-stage Parkinson's disease. Born in Harlem in 1937 to immigrants of Jamaican descent, Powell grew up in the Bronx. He graduated from City College of New York, where he discovered ROTC and joined the Army in 1958. After serving 2 decorated combat tours in Vietnam, earning a Bronze Star and 2 Purple Hearts, he would ultimately rise to the highest ranks of service and spend 4 decades in public life, serving under 3 Republican presidents. During his term as the Joint Chiefs Chairman, journalists dubbed his approach to war as the Powell Doctrine, which called for applying military force only with a clear objective, decisive troop strength, and public support. And during a speech at the 1996 Republican National Convention, Powell gave this controversial answer for why he was a Republican. Take a listen.
I became a Republican because I want to help fill the big tent that our party has raised to attract all Americans. You all know that I believe in a woman's right to choose, and I strongly support affirmative action. And I was invited here by my party to share my views with you because we are a big enough party and big enough people to disagree on individual issues and still work together for our common goal, restoring the American dream.
Tributes have poured in throughout the day from leaders and former colleagues who are hailing Powell as a hero. Former President Obama gave this statement, which reads in part, "Along the way, General Powell helped a generation of young people set their sights higher. He never denied the role that race played in his own life or in our society more broadly. But he also refused to accept that race would limit his dreams, and through his steady and principled leadership, helped pave the way for so many who would follow." The White House has ordered flags to be lowered through Friday in Powell's honor. Powell is survived by his wife, Alma, and 3 children, Michael, Linda, and Anne-Marie. Joining me now to discuss is former Homeland Security Secretary under the Obama administration, Jeh Johnson. Secretary Johnson,
Hi, Charles.
Thank you for being here tonight. Talk to us about the
pleasure.
Colin Powell that you knew.
Thanks for having me on, Charles, particularly on this evening. I have to say I didn't know Colin Powell personally that well. I would run into him in Washington at official events or, say, an Alfalfa Club dinner. And I used to joke with him because a lot of people mistook my own father for Colin Powell.
I think we're having a little
1998.
difficulty. Okay.
It all started in 1998. It was my first Senate confirmation hearing to be general counsel of the Department of the Air Force. Senator Strom Thurmond of South Carolina, age 96, was chairing the committee hearing that day. My family was in the front row, including my father. C-SPAN was there, the camera lights were on, and Senator Thurmond kept staring at my father all through the hearing. And finally, he whispered to the senator next to him. And when a 96-year-old man whispers, everybody in the room can hear it. And he said in a very audible whisper, "Is that Colin Powell back there?" And then years later, it became so frequent, my father being mistook for Colin Powell, One day we were in an open Jeep on Martha's Vineyard. My mother and my father dropped us off on the beach. My father drove off, and somebody on the beach said, "Hey, that was Colin Powell." And I would say to my mother, "Mom, there goes Colin Powell." But anyway, he today, as we remember him, everyone's referring to him rightly as the quintessential American story. Born of Jamaican immigrants, grew up in the Bronx, went to City College, and rose to the highest levels of the United States government. People have referred to his various first national security advisor, first black chairman of the Joint Chiefs, first black secretary of state. To me, he was a role model because he was a hugely consequential figure. He had renowned credibility on both sides of the aisle, Democrat and Republican. Multiple presidents, Democratic and Republican, would welcome him to the Oval Office, and he happened to be black. He was so large in national security that his impact was much more than simply the trail that he blazed. And that's how I hope to have positioned myself in public life. I've been the first black lawyer and first black partner in my law firm. I was the first black secretary of Homeland Security. But there's much more to the story, obviously.
Right. I mean, I was a very young man when Colin Powell became chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I remember how big of a deal that was. What do you think that his legacy will be when the history books are written?
I believe his legacy will be the impact he had on national security, on American foreign policy, the Powell Doctrine. He was one of the first warfighters, war heroes, who spoke about the limits of armed conflict, the limits of warfare, the importance of having an exit strategy, the importance of having national broad consensus, the importance of having very defined goals in armed conflict. The reality is, and regrettably, Charles, we make this mistake repeatedly. It's much easier to start an armed conflict than it is to end one. And General Powell understood that. And that is a large part of his legacy, in my view. Yes, he was a trailblazer. And because of his example, frankly, I believe that a lot of people could look at people like me in national security, look past our race, and see us for the strengths that we bring to the Situation Room, to the cabinet room.
Powell's reputation took a bit of a hit after his presentation in 2003 to the UN Security Council, making then President Bush's case for war in Iraq, despite having deep misgivings himself. How do you think that factors into how we will view Powell?
Good question. Well, longer term, it does not appear to have cost him much in terms of his stature and credibility. If you look at the impact, for example, of his endorsement of Barack Obama in 2008, which was huge. I remember that speech, and the reports are that he went to the CIA, he rolled up his sleeves, he wanted to understand the intelligence. Is there really WMD in Iraq? He wanted to see all the best intelligence. And somehow, because he was the political appointee for a president who was determined to go to Iraq and to go to war, he found a way to publicly make that case to the UN. I remember sitting in my law office at the time in 2003 with some of my colleagues, and we were all anxious to hear the case. I mean, okay, we're finally going to hear from the most credible person in the Bush administration what the case is for going to war in Iraq, what the case is that there's WMD in Iraq. And I remember being left with a feeling that this is all there is. If this were a jury trial, it wouldn't survive a directed verdict, a motion for directed verdict. It would never get to a jury. So the case did appear to be thin. And I remember thinking that at the time. Yes, even General Powell himself was honest enough in retrospect to say it was not his finest moment.
You know, as you mentioned before, Powell made a big deal, a big splash by endorsing Barack Obama against John McCain, not because, as he said, he didn't like John McCain, but he just thought that the Republican Party was going in the wrong direction at the time.
Yeah.
And he has subsequently endorsed Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and has said that he, could no longer at a certain point call himself a Republican. What do you make of that evolution? Black Republicans are, we just have to be honest, not that common. He was a very high visibility Black Republican. In fact, as the case you just pointed out, I think they hid behind his credibility in order to make the case for war. What do we make of the way that he had to separate himself from that party and how that positions him historically?
Two things. I think it speaks to his own credibility. In 2008, he rose above party politics and regarded Barack Obama as a transformational figure that was good for America. The election of Barack Obama would be a step toward a more perfect union in his view. And so he rose above party allegiance to endorse the person he thought was best for America. But the other answer to your question, Charles, is I think that evolution says a lot about the Republican Party itself. That clip you showed of him speaking at the 1996 Republican Convention, that was a different Republican Party. Bob Dole, the nominee that year, was a self-proclaimed Lincoln Republican. How many Republicans refer to themselves that way now? So the party itself has evolved. And I remember in that endorsement in 2008 of Barack Obama, he referred to some of the darker sides of America. The anti-Muslim rhetoric, though Barack Obama was not a Muslim. And he obviously was the last straw was obviously January 6th for him, where he said, I could no longer call myself a Republican. And I know he was deeply troubled by the election of Donald Trump. And so it speaks a lot to the evolution of the Republican Party that patriotic Americans like Colin Powell had to step away from it, proclaim that they were stepping away from it.
Former Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson, thank you so much for your time this evening. I really appreciate it.